So the workshop goals for today will be to understand the genre of a literature review, to gain perspective on the writing process, to learn tools for synthesizing the literature. We're going to look at a graphic organizer, also called a matrix. We're going to focus on that in the second half of the workshop. The first half will really be focusing more on understanding what a literature review is and has to do. We're not going to be covering citation management programs like EndNote. For that, you can work with Shield's library. This is really more about the writing part. So if you could, in chat, respond to these three things. We're going to write for about 4 minutes. What do you think the purpose of a lit review might be? What might a good literature review do? How do you think writing a lit review for your thesis or dissertation might help you? And if you're already drafting, what brings you here? What difficulties are you facing? So let's take 4 or 5 minutes and go ahead and write directly into chat, please. First of all, I'm seeing some familiar faces, not familiar faces, familiar names, which makes me feel so happy. And then also a lot of the points, you guys are really getting a lot of the important points. So I'm going to go over some in my words just to bring together some of your insights. So yeah, you were writing about gaining an overview and background on the topic, understanding what I see Xiao Yu has, understanding the previous research has been done and what needs to be further accomplished. To develop your own ideas, right? And to determine your methodology. So a lit review is an essential part of the research process, which is why it's so hard, because it's actually research. And some of you said also to make sure you're not replicating research or reinventing the wheel. To gain knowledge that allows you to demonstrate how your work builds on or departs from previous research, and to demonstrate that your research is needed, right? And ideally, somebody else said this in better words than mine, but ideally writing the lit review allows you to create your own conceptual map of the literature on your topic, allows you to gain that. What conversations have researchers already had about this topic, and how does your work join that conversation? A literature review is a descriptive analytic summary of the research on a very specific topic. The reference to the prior literature is a defining feature of academic writing. It demonstrates your credibility. Lit reviews often appear in introductions to scholarly articles, research articles. I'm sure you've all seen that. They're also published as standalone genres to keep researchers and professionals up to date on current research in the field. And for graduate students, the lit review is part of a dissertation or thesis, prospectus, or qualifying paper. So a lit review, and this is a really important point, a lit review is a synthesis of what's been written, not summaries of individual papers. And that's one of the biggest complaints we get from professors working with graduate students, is that they're seeing, sort of big lists of summaries of individual papers that doesn't provide an overview of the ideas. So you want to focus on key ideas, concepts, or methods, not on individual papers. And because that's really hard, we'll spend time today on synthesizing. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the research question and the lit review, which also helps focus your research. A research question establishes parameters, right? What you will and will not look at. And so it creates that researchable topic. Because writing the review is part of the research process, your research question will evolve as you learn more. A well-focused research question is founded on a deep understanding of work in relevant areas, which is why it may refine as you learn more about your topic. It's founded on understanding what's known about your topic and what's unknown, and how your topic enters the conversation that other researchers are having about your topic. So here's an image of the research process. Notice, unfortunately, it doesn't go in a straight line, right? Maybe some of you have already started working on your lit review, are feeling caught in a cyclone of arrows. So they talk about here identifying your research question, reviewing discipline styles, and we're going to think about that today, how there's a lot of differences in literature reviews depending on your discipline. Searching the literature, managing your references, critically analyzing and evaluating the research, and synthesizing it and writing the review. But notice again, whoa, we're going back on the cycle. It keeps going around, because as you're learning more, you may realize, oh, I need to search this other part of the literature, right? And I need to analyze that and synthesize that with what I've already gotten. So to create a researchable question, obviously you identify an area of interest and narrow it by exploring the literature. And you want to also map the literature to understand the conversations researchers have had about your specific topic. And that's where we'll look at using a graphic organizer to sort of map the literature. You should also look at the scope of other thesis and dissertations from your program, and also discuss scope with your advisor. I can't underemphasize the need to become familiar with the genre of literature reviews in your field, okay? And whoops, I have to go back one. Oh, I guess I have another slide that I'll show you a database with information of how to access dissertations and theses that are chaired by your advisor, but I'll do that after. Okay, planning the literature review, some areas of focus might include the early history of your research area, cutting edge work in the field, significant findings, debates and trends, theories, models and concepts, methods, and research design. So those might be some areas that you focus on in your review. You also want to consider discipline-specific expectations. For example, some fields, like engineering, do not include a historical overview, while other fields may expect it. So those are the kinds of things you can look at when you're considering samples in your field. So you want to find those discipline-specific models. One place you can look, professionals, this is a genre that exists out there in the world. You can look at professional lit reviews in journals in your field. But as I was mentioning, you also want to locate student samples from your specific program. This link I've also included on the handout. You want to check the library database for thesis and dissertations and ask your advisor for recommendations. What do they think a successful dissertation and lit review looks like? You know, it's embedded in the dissertation chapters. So you can look up the thesis and dissertations by advisor on the library database. So I strongly recommend that. Other people have done this before you. And also advocate for yourself. You want to clarify the requirements, the expected scope, the approximate number of sources. Again, the number of sources required varies widely among fields, departments, and degrees. You can have conversations about this, and then that's where also gathering a few samples will really help a lot. I mean, you are spending so much time on the actual research you're conducting, but you need to spend a little time researching the writing that you're doing as well. So searching the literature, save time, work with a librarian, that's what they're there for. It's a wonderful resource that you have access to. Attend an EndNote workshop through Shields. Mine works cited lists for relevant articles. Pay special attention to frequently cited studies on your topic. And if it's relevant for your discipline, ask your advisor for reading suggestions or foundational work on your topic. Okay, so we're going to do something in breakout rooms, but first I need to paste the activity into chat. Let me do that. And this is an activity from the Swales and Feek book that you may have read for today. And by the way, you can find that entire, oh, nope, that's not right. Let me paste it again. Oh, okay. You can find the entire Swales and Feek book online if you Google it. There we go. So what we're going to do in a moment, There's an activity with 10 questions. Your group is going to discuss as many questions as you can, but each group is going to be responsible for reporting back on one question. So when you're sent into breakout rooms, pay attention to your breakout room number. Okay. So there's 10 questions. If your group is group number 6, you're going to share your responses to question number 6 when we get back. So decide on somebody before you start who's willing to speak for the group. And Melissa is going to help me out with setting up the groups. So my group number 1, who we're talking, who I had the pleasure of meeting with, you were focused on the preparation of a lit review as a 3-step process: finding the relevant literature, reading, and then writing up a review. And I think Swales asked us to think about whether that seemed realistic or not. What did you guys come up with? Group, do we have a representative for group number 1 that wants to unmute? Jasmine.
Yeah, hi. So we kind of got into a long discussion because we had poli-sci and engineers and kind of STEM backgrounds in that group. And so the main discussion was, how did our approaches differ to this kind of 3-step idea? And my approach specifically, and I think the others would agree, that it kind of meshed together. And to all 3 of those kind of happen at the same time, so that as you review, you might start adding on, oh, this information looks interesting. And that could lead into a process of, oh, too much looks interesting at once. And so then we got into the discussion of how do we contain that process as it loops around in circles.
Oh, so well put. And one thing that came up in this group was also like, when do you stop reading? When do you start writing? How would you answer that based on the discussion, Jasmine?
I framed it in the sense of my partially written literature review, which was just that it had to connect to the story of my literature review. And so if I extended to something beyond that, added another section that I wasn't planning for, it absolutely must be something that's relevant to my research. Otherwise, I shouldn't include it. And then it's the question of, you're going to show up to a conference and somebody will say, oh, you're missing this information. Well, yes, but, this work is relevant in X, Y, and Z. And I couldn't capture everything. And that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and I think that's where also just what you said, the only thing that is thinking not only of my research area, but my specific research question, keeping back to that can also help. Awesome. What did I come up with here? I have some, I thought this was an unrealistic suggestion that it's a 3-step process. Because as I already mentioned, writing is part of the research process. Writing is also a knowledge-making activity. We use writing to learn, right? So part of writing is part of learning research in your area. And as Jasmine was saying, as you learn more, you have to refocus, find other research, continue to synthesize it. The graduate student, and so I sent out 2 documents. One was a chapter from Swales, which you can find for free online, pirated. So I didn't give you the whole thing because I couldn't directly participate in the pirating, but you can find it. And you can also find the complete key. And the key for that was written by a graduate student. And she's expressed something I think very similar to what Jasmine is saying, is that she found this back and forth between writing and researching the literature. That was her process. Okay, group 2, your literature review should discuss problems and controversies in your field. Who's our spokesperson? You may need to unmute. Oh, come on. There you are.
I'll take it.
You guys did not decide on didn't decide on someone.
We were too caught up in conversation.
It was a great conversation.
Yeah, our conversation regarding if your literature review has to discuss problems and controversies in your field. And I think we kind of came to the conclusion that your literature review does not necessarily have to address problems and controversies within your field. However, if that is what's pertinent to your research topic, and if it fits, if that's how you're going to show how your research is going to contribute into the field and covering the holes of controversies and problems, then of course you would have to address that. If anyone else from the group has something else to add, please feel free.
I'll give a moment for anybody else to pipe in.
Hello, sorry.
Hi, Marta. No, it's great.
Yeah, I would just like to add that if the controversy is relevant to your topic, I find that it's important to position yourself as well as a researcher within that controversy or debate, because at the end of the day, you need to make a decision.
Yeah. And you also have to think about what your readers will expect. So your readers
Mhm.
being your committee, right? Your advisor
Yeah.
and your committee. What sorts of debates or issues or frameworks will they expect you to justify?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one way of thinking about it. And we also talked about not going so broad. You can't discuss all the problems and controversies
No.
in your field, right? So I would just piggyback on what Marta said, as directly relevant to your research question. What did I write down here? I think I just said the same thing. I wanted to mention, don't go broad. So US readers specifically expect a very focused overview of the issues directly relevant to your study. In some other traditions, in European traditions, they may go broader in terms of providing an overview of problems and controversies. US readers expect very focused overview pertaining to your study.
Yeah, and that's actually, sorry, coming from a European tradition, that's actually hard for me. I sometimes think that I need to include like everything related to my field from day one.
Exactly, the
today.
history of.
Yeah, and then I realized I'm in the US. But
Yeah, and that's a great thing to.
yeah.
Okay, my
Yeah,
group
thank you.
3. Somebody is going to get brave. Your lit review needs to explain clearly which potential areas for inclusion have not been covered in the review and why they have been omitted. Sort of related to the last one.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes.
Hello. Hello.
Yes. So our group talked about this. This is also related with the previous one. So we talk about it will be the topic that's directly relevant to our study or even the methods that you use. So we are thinking about like one of the group members mentioned about example, like I'm focusing on the modeling approach for a specific topic. Then we will use a literature review focus on the modeling approach. But we also find that sometimes it's really difficult to find the boundary, especially sometimes we'll feel, oh, this one is somewhat relevant, but how relevant, then we will decide to put it into the literature review.
Yeah, that's tricky. Does it help to think again about your advisor and your committee and what they would expect you to include or not?
Yeah, I think that will help, and also discuss directly with your advisor will help with this process as well.
I think that's great that these gray areas are really useful to discuss with advisors. What did I say? If there are branches of the research you have deliberately excluded, explain the logic. That wasn't from me, that was from the Swales thing. And things your readers might question, right? Those you would definitely want to address. Okay, group 4, your lit review should focus on very recent publications because they are likely most relevant.
Hello.
Is that realistic for you? Hi.
Hi. Our conclusion is that for this point, it depends on your research. What kind of research are you doing? Like, for example, if you are doing the science research, if you are doing the very hot area and your research is heavily researched and a lot of people are doing the similar research to you. So in this case, yeah, the point 4 maybe it's the correct one. In that case, you will find a lot of recent publications that are very relevant to your current research. So you can learn a lot from them and use them as the main source of your literature research. But in other case, like the social science or the very fundamental science research, in this case, the very relevant publications usually are very old, and some of them are even the last 2 centuries before. So, but if you only cite the recent publications, they are not relevant to your current research, and they are not helpful. And you cannot only talk about the recent publication. So in this case, it's better to, yeah, maybe you can cite some, but it's better to focus more on the more relevant publications, which are old ones.
Exactly. That's I think the key is what's relevant. Is only the recent relevant, or is also some of the older relevant? And Shu Hao, I think you made such a great point that it also depends on your field. Absolutely, beautifully articulated. And what did I'm not going to have said anything better on this slide. I'm trying to get it. Yeah, that's all. I just had an example from like an ecology graduate student I was working with last winter studying avian habitats. And the expectation was that they would survey methods developed by key researchers, in the past, however, for quite a long time. So absolutely discipline specific. All right, my group 5, your literature review should be as long as possible in order to persuade your reader that you have read very widely.
Hey, so as a group, I think we generally disagreed with this. We acknowledge that you want to persuade your reader, but you don't have to make it as long as possible to do that. I think your literature review should be effective, and if you're writing to write to make it as long as possible, you may in fact be derailing your own research. And it's not very helpful to have references just for reference's sake.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, even though we know it, we sort of feel like, well, part of the realistic purpose is to demonstrate your knowledge, right? To just demonstrate your knowledge to your committee. So we can feel like, wow, we just got to keep madly writing. But I absolutely agree, Mackenzie. And I would like to say that that's actually the last thing your advisor wants, is the longest lit review possible, right? And just what Mackenzie said, you want to concisely demonstrate your thorough knowledge. And I would argue that one way you do that is through a well-organized literature review as well, which is what synthesis has to do with. Okay, group 6, your lit review should help reveal gaps in the existing body of knowledge.
Hi. So we as a group agreed that, yeah, your lit review should lead to or point out the gaps of knowledge and kind of lead into what your proposed research is going to do to kind of fill those gaps or fill a gap or something like that.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Ravi. And it's interesting, the graduate student from sociology was saying it depends, but I said I agree with you guys. I think yes, especially for the sciences, for any STEM field. Otherwise, it's not original research, and isn't that supposed to be the point of research? Is that you demonstrate your research is needed? You're doing original research, right? So, I'm in agreement. That was short and sweet. Is there anything you want to add on, Ravi?
I don't really have anything. If anybody from my group wants to jump in, I'll let them do that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep going then. Group 7, your lit review should critically evaluate each piece of work you discuss. You're going to leave me in the lurch up here like this, group 7. Somebody's going to feel bad. Cece's going to step up.
Yes, we didn't choose someone, we just kind of dove in, but I think we talked about how it really depends on your goal and how in depth you're going in a specific kind of question, but it's not necessarily about judging each piece, but really looking at I guess themes that are there.
Yeah.
so that you can give people an idea of what the landscape of what's been done before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that if you went about critically evaluating each piece, you probably wouldn't be able to accomplish pulling back to show them that landscape. So I don't think that's realistic. I think that it would be unlikely if you did that to lead to a focused discussion, like just like what you're saying, in other words, to lead to a focused discussion of key issues or key areas. But you may want to critically discuss aspects of studies directly relevant to your topic. You may want to critically evaluate things that are directly relevant to your research question. I think that's where critically evaluating groups of studies or particular studies that are very crucially direct, related to what you're doing, that's when you want to engage more with that. I think if you did that with every study, it'd be the end of you. We do the 22-decade plan in graduate school. Nobody wants to do that. Group number 8, talk to me about this super important one. An overall chronological ordering of the literature is a good approach.
Hi, my name is Kirsten from Group 8. And yeah, I think we felt that generally the chronological ordering is like a good logical way to go about things, but it also really depends on what your topic is, and potentially a better way to organize things is the relevance or like the order of whatever your story is. Because if you're jumping in to something that happened 30 years ago and hasn't really been discussed, then kind of going in reverse chronological or chronological order doesn't necessarily always track with the way that your concepts are bouncing around.
Let me ask you this from a different way. Could you see any limitations to sticking with an overall chronological order?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, literature just kind of, or research just kind of happens in like fits and spurts, and people are often like going back and revisiting topics. So like the evolution of the topic doesn't necessarily track in the same way that time does. This topic may be continually revisited in an order that's different from what makes, in a chronological order that's different from what makes sense to discuss.
Yeah. So I want to add on, I'm going to kind of bring this back to what Cece was saying as well. I really don't think the chronological order should be your default, like what you automatically do. Because I think doing that, if you start back in time and then you go up until recent or the other way, it's going to lead you to summarizing individual studies or summarizing groups of studies, right? Which is what we see a lot. And I think it makes sense in some way. You think, okay, I'll approach it chronologically, but you're the one that's going to have to impose order on the literature, right? And if you stick to a strictly chronological order, it's going to limit you in being able to focus your ideas, right? I agree that your organization is going to depend on your topic, but like Cece said, you're going to need to develop sections that address particular subtopics, right? Methodology, habitat, drug mechanism, whatever your field is. Now, within those sections, you might discuss studies chronologically. But I'm pausing here because I want you to take this slide in and take this moment in, because I completely understand why, because we're kind of reading it chronologically in a certain way, but it's not going to allow you to impose enough order. And those are the literature reviews that get booted back, where it all makes sense to you, but your advisor's like, well, what are you trying to say? Because this is just summaries of a bunch of studies and all the relevant things from each study through time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Group 9, your literature review can safely ignore work not in your immediate field. Who's my brave niner? Not sure it's meant to be, but just a heads up that your screen isn't shared. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, it was. Oh, no, it was absolutely meant to be. Thank you, Paige. So kind of you. I've been doing all asynchronous teaching online. So there we go. So sorry. Okay, where are we? No, that's okay, but do we have a group 9? That's another question. All right. Any ideas from anybody? Anybody? Cece, what do you think?
I think it has to do with the relevance to your research question. So I could even take things that aren't immediately in my field, which is education, and I might take something from, I'm just making it up, leadership, you know, but because I'm looking at educational leadership, I mean, it's kind of, but it's bringing those together. So I think that it has to go back to your research question, but I think it's hard to do in practice because sometimes if you don't have enough literature in your field, like I'm doing work on women's centers, there's not a whole lot out there. So I have to kind of look to other fields to kind of get some stuff.
Well, it sounds like the nature of your project is interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
So there's another. I had a hard time with this one too. I don't blame group 9 for staying muted. I don't judge you. I do think it depends on your field in part. This is certainly not true for interdisciplinary topics. Swales and Feek, they do recommend surveying related fields. They say there's so much interdisciplinary research going on that we can't ignore the interdiscipline, you know, the interdisciplinary research. My response to that is Swales and Feek are not in STEM. Those guys are in sort of education related writing studies fields, maybe edging on sociology. I would be afraid about you guys getting lost in the literature. So I would say pay attention to your field and the expectations there. And that's also worth a conversation with your advisor. But that's where you can look at professional lit reviews in your field, look at student lit reviews in your field and see, are they talking about work in related areas, you know, and ask why is it or is it not important? You know, I think that's a question you can ask of your own project. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts. Marta?
Yeah, I was sorry. I was just thinking that it really depends on your project because I'm in Spanish linguistics, but I do critical discourse studies. So yes, I do take a lot from discourse studies within linguistics themselves, but I also need to draw from more sociological sources or more philosophical ones. So it is a very interdisciplinary approach to the study of discourse. And in that sense, I constantly need to go back and forth and try to pull all the different fields together. Of course, my main position, so to say, it's from linguistics, but I do need many other fields. So I cannot stay within my immediate field.
No, I think that those are wonderful points, and I don't know if you could see while you were speaking, I added to my PowerPoint. So it depends on your field and your project.
Yeah.
Okay, last one, group 10, and we're right on time for my timing. Who knew that it was possible? Your lit review can help you discover conceptual traditions and frameworks that have been used to examine problems, as well as help you show how your work might contribute to a cumulative scholarly or research process. That was a mouthful. What did you think?
We struggled a little bit with this one just because it seems so general, but we tended to agree with it. Like research it's not in a bubble. Like your paper does not exist outside of everyone else's. And because of that, you're taking those methodologies from other people or you're adapting them. And it's really important that your readers can see how you're doing that. And also just to give you more ideas, because there's so many people doing novel things, and it's important to look at all of these frameworks for problem solving.
I feel like that was so beautifully put. I just can't even comment on it. I'll show my little paltry notes now. I think that it's sort of a main purpose of writing the review is to learn your field's frameworks. And I love how what you said, your specific research isn't happening in that bubble. And that's really the process of the lit review. It's to show your committee how it's related to what, the relevant things right outside that bubble, right? Wonderful. Okay, wow, was I already going to a next slide? Let me just look at my plan here. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, 156, we're good. We're on slide 25. So we're gonna shift now to focus on synthesizing the literature. And I'm gonna show you a type of graphic organizer called a matrix, which is based on this Dr. Gerard's Health Sciences Lit Reviews Made Easy, the matrix method, but is really widely applicable in the sciences, social sciences. And I have another model for humanities, but I think this can be adapted for humanities as well. So I already said it's a graphic organizer. So you can use a table or a spreadsheet. A matrix helps you organize information from research articles so that you can think about it, right? So it helps you not stay trapped in the low order concerns. It helps you make sort of higher order conceptual links between studies. Allows you to compare studies, helps you see patterns or common threads, and prepares you to synthesize. You can also use a matrix to identify groups of studies you're going to need to discuss together. So here's a sample straightforward matrix. You would be filling it out horizontally. By the way, when I do that, can you see my cursor going across or no?
Yes.
Also, you can see my 9-year-old wrote bones in white text down at the bottom. In any case, so author and title, year, purpose, research question, what were they trying to find out? Doing this in your own words, the results, the summary in your own words. But this last section, this is where I think a matrix becomes really useful. This is where you're adding additional columns to your spreadsheet based on your topic. Okay, so let's look at some samples. Let me see if and I also had a note that I was gonna paste some samples in the chat. And since I'm getting to be amazingly proficient in this first hour of online teaching, I'm gonna do it. Chat. Here we go. There you go. The samples are there too, so you can look at them at your own leisure. And I also have some additional resources at the bottom of this. So developing your matrix. I think that this process can be used in a couple of different ways, by the way. For one, I think even just using a table, not even an Excel sheet, just if you're looking at a really preliminary small set of studies, if you're very early in your process, this can be useful before you go on to look at a broader batch of studies, or doing this, or going straight in if you're ready. Okay, so developing a preliminary research question, skimming your sources to gain perspective on research issues so you can choose column topics. As you skim, note important and recurrent topics or categories in the articles. And then this step 3 is where you select additional column topics that you're going to add to your matrix. So what are you can consider, what did the researchers look at? How do their research categories relate to what you want to find out, right? And as you fill this out, you may sort of discover additional columns. And then, if I filled it out for 5 studies, and then I realize, oh, I'm also going to need to look at, the materials they use. So I'll put a materials column in and then go back and fill those out. And then the 4th step would be using that matrix or graphic organizer to synthesize the literature. And you're looking at, what connections or conversations you see between the articles, that higher order stepping back, what similarities do you see, what difference do you see, what gaps do you see? So the first 2 are from upper division undergraduates, actually. They're smaller projects. This person—
Lisa, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would it be possible for you to share the link to the Google Doc?
I did. It's in chat.
Oh, We didn't see
Is
it.
it not in there? Let's look again. I just posted it. I see. Because I just sent it to Melissa. That's what happened. Poor Melissa has to look at my. I really appreciate you asking. So sample matrices, here they come. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking. Okay. So how can we treat cell signaling pathways in bone to increase bone formation as potential treatments for osteoporosis? So here you have just the basics: author, title, journal, year. I would suggest, do you think you should start with the earliest, the most recent one, or the oldest one? I would start with the most recent study so you can look at trends through time in that way. Purpose, this person wanted to look at pathophysiology, the cells affected, and the mechanisms to compare those. This person was doing assessment and managing sports-related concussions in adolescents. So for that topic, it was particularly important to look at the variety of clinical assessment tools that were being used. So that was going to change the outcomes. The treatment, for this particular topic. Variable definitions, if this is relevant to your project, is very useful to look at how definitions have been, what definitions are being used. And these people, these were smaller projects, those first two that I have, and they just used like a Word document table. This is a set of sample matrices for preliminary research in a nursing project. And they made 3 separate tables. Their research question is, how does prenatal cannabis use vary based on the status of cannabis legalization in the US? So, and they filled it out a little bit differently, but the first table is impacts of prenatal use, prenatal cannabis use, cannabis use, reviews. And then the second table was impacts in primary literature. And the third table is legalization's impact on vulnerable populations. So you can also organize either in Excel or in tables, different sets of data according to your sort of different aspects of your research. I have another, and I had highlighted this, the method section. So just that, you probably realize this, but frequently finding out, looking at research design or methods is a crucial part of the process, and a lot of people will include those a heading on research design in their matrix. Here's another sample that wasn't working to share through Google Docs, but this is somebody a graduate student I worked with last winter in archaeology. Her research question was, what are the evolutionary origins of stone tool use in white-faced capuchins, which I discovered are monkeys? So again, one of the reasons I love this approach is it works with all different kinds of fields. So let me scroll over. Where is it? Okay. So again, on the left, you start with the sort of basic columns, right? The study, the year, the main findings. And then you start to break down, well, what will be useful for me to compare across studies, right? So I'll just read a few of them, the species, the data collection methods, and then very specific to her topic, is this an isolated population? The proposed adaptive significance of their behavior. It became relevant for her to look at climate location and tool materials. And you can see by doing something like this, by getting it all out in a chart like this, then you can start to say, okay, I'm making this up, I'm not an archaeologist, but what's the relationship between the tool materials and the climate location? And that is a focused section, perhaps, of your lit review. Okay, so let me get back to the presentation. Okay. And I am gonna do in present view. You guys don't even know how well I'm doing given how lousy I am with all of this. Okay, so we're gonna take 7 minutes to write right now. On your own, consider your research question. What types of things would be most useful for you to compare across studies to answer your research question, and why? And if you can, again, write directly in chat or write in something else on something else and paste it into chat, that would be great, because you want to save your answers to this. I wanted to ask more generally how you think that this process of identifying what you want to look at across studies, how it might help you. Anybody willing to share?
Yeah, I actually found this exercise useful just mostly thinking about what my question was and kind of like what things I could get at just by comparing across the literature, because I have a good idea of what types of studies exist now, but I hadn't really been thinking very much about like what kind of common denominators they all had that I could pull from.
Awesome. Other folks?
I found this to be really useful in thinking about what studies are relevant for me to read versus what I could probably put off for later. Because I have a matrix built and I do have some columns in it, but like my question is about specific ecological processes in seed microbiomes. And so just thinking about adding a column for what process is being studied in this paper versus this paper, that'll help me refine a lot more what papers I end up reading and how they fit together.
That's terrific, Jillian. Anything you can axe off your plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other folks?
I think it was a very useful exercise to organize the reading process itself and how to later like transform it into the lit review, like because I read kind of without a goal, I think.
Right.
After having thought about these questions and being able to pinpoint issues that you can try and find in every piece you read and compare them, and I think it helps you sort that whole thing out, like both the reading process and then being able to translate that into topics and for the lit review, if that makes sense.
It makes such perfect sense. And actually, that is why, like for my undergrads, that's why I sign these. It really scaffolds the reading process. So, I mean, I remember when I started grad school, I could spend like a whole day on one article and nobody has time for that. So if you know,
I still do that.
I know we can't, right? But also the further you, and also you're absorbing a lot early on, especially, but then the further along you get and the more you know what you're looking for, the more that process can speed up.
Yeah.
So
yeah, thank you for the exercise. It really helped me.
Absolutely. So great to hear. Anybody else want to pipe in with anything? Okay. I'm going to go over one or two more slides and then we'll do the survey. So please stick on for one more moment. Here's some general writing tips. Write every day. Take notes when you're reading, when you're researching, in the lab, in the field. Be informal, include observations, questions, problems, reactions. Discuss your work with others in and out of your field. Socialize and discuss research with each other. And a reminder to take advantage of our writing consultations, which are on the handout, the matrix handout. Okay, I need to drop, well, I want to take questions, and at the same time, as you think if you have any questions, I'm going to drop the survey into the box, into the chat. And if you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask. Okay. And I would really ask you, just so we can continue to offer relevant workshops and get your feedback on this workshop, if you could please just take 5 minutes. The link to the survey for this session is now in chat. And if anybody else has questions, I'll stick on. I'll stay here while you guys fill out the survey, and you can just pipe in with any questions.
I actually had a question. Before you actually talked about what the matrix method was, my mind kind of jumped to something else, which was like a visual representation of the literature that you're finding. Are there like I guess I was thinking of like organizing like a binomial grid where it's like this topic A, topic B, topic A, topic B across the top, X and Y axes, and then like just sorting papers into the 4 squares. Are there or however many squares there are there applications or things just for kind of like plotting the papers you're finding? Because I've just been reading and I've got hundreds of papers, not hundreds, 100 papers.
Right.
And just the idea of putting them all into a spreadsheet sounds like disastrous right now. But I just wanted to find a way to do it like a little bit more quick and dirty. But.
Right. So maybe somebody else can answer to your image. I have to keep remembering. I've got a new monitor over there.
Oh, so yeah. No, I'm doing the same
thing. Are you guys used to that at this point? Everybody's just turned the other side. So in this Swales and Feek book, is it backwards or can you see it right? What? Okay.
It looks good. It looks good.
This is what you can pirate online. And they've got in actually that first chapter I shared with you, they have, if you Google online too, you can find stuff on mind maps, which is different from what you're talking about. This is kind of a visual diagram. And I think if I was going back to writing a dissertation, I would have liked to do something like that, right? And even people in, when I do a seminar in lit reviews, and I've got people up there on the whiteboard, writing as they're drafting up there, drawing to make it make sense to them. And I'm a very visual person. I think that would have been helpful for me. So if you're interested in that kind of mind map, you can Google mind maps online. And that's really, just using an image that shows the relationships between concepts and categories of research. So you might start to think about, okay, if I was going to do that binomial grid or whatever crazy thing you're talking about, what types of literature would be in there? So maybe what you're looking for right now is some conceptual coherence without having to do all the data entry. And maybe you could use a mind map or something like that and get the concepts, figure out the concepts, then you could find a way to tag, on EndNote or something to tag the studies that you've done, that you've already read.
Yeah, because I've already got everything I use Mendeley, and you can also do tags in there. And we've got kind of like loose folders of where they go, but there's just so much overlap that a lot of things are just kind of sitting in the big, like unsorted, like master folder.
Right. Well, and that's true too. And that's where you see like, I showed that example in the nursing program where she has like 3 different tables, and I didn't check, but I'm just absolutely assuming that some of those tables contain the same studies even. So sometimes there's overlap in that way as well. Does anybody else have any suggestions for Kirsten?
No, I think that was very helpful. And I don't know if I just didn't read the email closely enough, but I definitely didn't read that first chapter before coming to the workshop today. So I'll definitely look for that book online.
Sure thing. Do you want me to drop it in the chat?
Yeah, actually, that would be great.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, thanks, Paige.
So what was your bucket matrix? Can you tell us that again, Kirsten?
Yeah, well, so the literature that I'm working, or the lit review that I'm working on, we're supposed to be proposing a conceptual framework for a new idea, and it's for my class, but the idea is that it will eventually be proposed. And I'm looking at plasticity, specifically behavioral plasticity, physiological plasticity, and morphological plasticity, and how there may be trade-offs in prioritizing one response or the other to the cue, and how those responses may depend on like the time scale of the cue. And there are some studies that look at like 2 of those elements, but not necessarily all 3. There are a lot that look at just 1 and look at time scale. And so like just trying to think about how to we kind of got like the types of responses and then the time scale of the responses, and thinking about where those which gaps those studies fill, and thinking about kind of like a bigger concept. We're supposed to come up with like a nice big flow chart to kind of explain what our new concept is. And right now I've got some crazy person mind maps drawn out, but they're not something that I could put into like a nice figure that would explain exactly what I'm thinking about to somebody else.
So you do actually want to move away from the maps and into something more categorized like this.
Yeah, mostly just because my mind maps are like everything's connected, and that's not particularly
And it
useful
is.
for proposing
You're right.
something new. But yeah,
In a way
yeah.
that you can talk about it.
yeah, exactly. And I tend to blather on, and so do my flow charts. So
Well, maybe you want to go back to those flow charts and look at some of the, I guess, buckets. Is that the idea? Or look at some of the big areas that you could group them into.
yeah, I'm getting some suggestions in personal messages here, so I will definitely be writing these down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What suggestions are you getting?
Somebody suggested using a conceptual diagram where you draw your study system and have text bubbles describing what's known and unknown for the system. And then, yeah, they kind of then talk about how it was useful to them. I think that is useful, but ideally this is something that's going to be just like for animal behavior, all animals, all systems, some sort of brilliant unifying thing, which is, a lot for a first year to be thinking about. But I do think that the kind of starting with what's known and then putting what's unknown, separating those two things and thinking about those explicitly is a really useful suggestion. So thank you to the person who sent that to me.
All right. We've got one more minute. Does anybody else want to pipe in with anything? Okay. I want to thank you all so much. I have to tell you, I was so nervous. I do all my online teaching asynchronously. I have office hours on Zoom, but this was the, will we have access to the recording later? Yes. Oh, and I'm also going to give you the slides right now. I'll paste them in chat right now. Can you believe I'm so silly? I didn't want to paste them in because I didn't want to have my answers to the, what a silly person I am. Okay, let me get back into chat. And here's the slides. And there will also be a recording later. So I just want to thank you all because I really appreciate how conversational this was able to be. And I think it's much more helpful to you guys that way too. So thank you everyone so much. Yes, the recording will be posted on Grad Pathways. Thanks, Melissa. I could have been more specific with that. All right, everyone, keep writing.